So Rab Shalom of Kamenka was a great tzaddik, a great rebbe who lived in the early 1800s in Poland and Galicia. But unlike many rebbes in his time, who would usually find a city to settle down in, and they would establish a community of Hasidim who would gather around them and learn from them, Rab Shalom chose to become a traveling rebbe. A traveling rebbe, instead of having a single place where he lived, he would travel around from one city to the other, and wherever he would go, he would teach, he would try to help people. Not like a Maggid, no, different than a Maggid. A Maggid would go around to give speeches. He would go around to help people, right? There are other rebbes who did similar things. We know that the Shpaler Zayda was known for this. He would travel around from place to place looking for people who needed help. However, most other rebbes who did it usually did it temporarily. Right? There are a lot of rebbes who would wander around for a few years. Rab Shalom spent his entire life wandering around trying to help people. Now, his custom was, whenever he would arrive in a city, the first thing he would do is he would ask the people in the city if they needed anything, if there's anything missing in the city, if there are any problems in the city, if there's any way he could help. And no city is perfect. Every city has some problems, and he would try to fix up the problems for the people in the city. So he would go around doing chesed, helping people. So our story begins as Rab Shalom arrives in a little city somewhere in Poland, and of course the people in town are very excited. This Rebbe Tzaddik came to their city. They came out all to greet him. And the Rosh HaKol, the president of the community, welcomed him into their city. And, as he's starting to settle down, the first thing he asks from the Rosh HaKol came in to speak with him. And he said, is there any, how are things going in your city? Is there any
Problems.
Any problems? Everything okay? And they're like, yeah, things are good. Baruch Hashem. And he says, okay, fine. It was already late. It was getting late, and he said, tomorrow morning I'll get to know the community better. Where's the local mikveh? And he said, we don't have a mikveh in our city. And he said, there's no mikveh here? Is there a mikveh for women who use the mikveh? No, we don't have a mikveh. So what do people do when they need to go to the mikveh? So he said, there's a river nearby that people can go to. What about the winter when it's very cold? Well, in the winter, there's people sometimes go to the big city. It's a few hours away, but people manage. So Shalom says to him, I don't understand. This is a nice Jewish community over here. How come there's no mikveh? Nobody built a mikveh. Why don't you build a mikveh? He said, there's no money. There's no money. And he said, well, I'm sure if you collect money, you can raise funds within the community. I'm sure the people in the community would love to build a mikveh. And he says, listen, we're a very poor town. Everybody in this city is very poor. We don't have we don't have a lot of rich people here. And we can't afford it. So Shalom says, this can't be. Whole city? Everybody's poor. There's got to be at least one rich person in the city. Every city has at least one gvir, one rich person. And the Rosh HaKol says, yeah, we do. We have one rich guy. His name is Todris. Todris. And Todris is a multimillionaire. He has tons of businesses. And but good luck getting one penny out of him. He's never given a penny to tzedakah. And Shalom says, well, listen, I'll speak to him. I'll meet with him. Can you arrange a meeting? I'll have a talk with him. I'm sure if he, for a mikveh, such an important cause, I'm sure he would love to help. And the Rosh HaKol says, it's not worth your time. Not worth your time. You don't know Tadris. Okay, I don't know Tadris, but I'll get to know him. I'll meet him. I'll speak with him. He says, no, this Tadris, he has never done a favor for anybody in his whole life. You've never met a person as selfish as Tadris. He says, really? Never done a favor for anybody? Yeah, even his, does he have any friends? No, nobody likes Tadris. Nobody could stand Tadris. Is Tadris married? Yes, he's married, but even his own wife can't stand it. All day they're fighting. You walk by Tadris' house and there's yelling and fighting and screaming coming from inside. It's crazy. And Shalom says, I thought the town had one problem. I see there's two problems in this city. Right? First of all, you guys need a mikveh. And also poor Tadris. Right? He has no friends. Nobody could stand him. In his own house, there's fighting all day. I gotta fix these two problems. I'm gonna take care of it. He says. He says to Rashak, "Oh, don't worry. I'll take care of these issues over here. We'll raise money. We'll get Tadris to sponsor the mikveh." And Rashak says, "Rabbi, I told you, it's not worth your time." So he says, "Listen, I give you my word. I'm not leaving this city until Tadris sponsors the mikveh." And Shakal says, "Well, you're going to be here a long time, Rabbi. Look into the local real estate market, right? You're going to have to buy a house over here, right?" And Shalom says, "Okay, listen, if it's going to take time, I'm okay with that. I'll find myself a place to stay. I'll rent a place for a couple of months, and I'm not leaving until Tadris sponsors the mikveh." Wonderful. Okay, so the next, so they quickly go. They look around. They find Avshalom a place to stay, a place where he could settle for a couple of months. The people in town are sure it's going to be a couple of years, but Avshalom is very optimistic, and he finds a place and he starts settling down. And as Avshalom is settling down, we're going to pause the story for a minute, and we're going to focus a little bit on this week's parsha. We're going to get back to Avshalom once he settles in this little Polish town. And we're going to focus a little bit on a pasuk in this week's parsha. So, in chapter 24, verse 5, the Torah says, if a man will get married, will take a new wife, so he should not go out to battle for the first year. The first year after his marriage, he needs to be devoted to his wife. He needs to spend time with his wife. He should he should be home for 1 year, so that he can make his wife happy. He can make his wife happy. So Rashi comes along, and Rashi says that the word v'simach es ishtoi. What does it mean, v'simach es ishtoi? So we translated v'simach es ishtoi, that he should make his wife happy. And this is how Rashi translates it. He says, yisamach es ishtoi. V'targumai v'yechti yasitzei. Rashi brings a proof to his explanation, to his translation. He says, if you look at Unclus's translation, Unclus also translates it like this, that a husband has a job during the first year of marriage to make his wife happy. And then Rashi continues, however, Rashi says there's another way to translate this word. Instead of saying he should make his wife happy, you could also translate it that he should be happy together with his wife.
He should be happy with his wife?
He should rejoice with his wife.
Part of his wife? Or?
With his wife. Right? He should be happy together with his wife.
That's why you don't understand Krishna.
And Rashi says somebody who translates it like this is making a terrible mistake. Not terrible, I shouldn't say terrible mistake. Rashi says he's making a mistake. Because even though it's the same word, and the word v'samach and v'simach are pretty similar, but they have different vowels. And v'samach means that he should be happy. V'simach means that he should make somebody else happy. So this is an incorrect translation. So this is a very, very strange. First of all, Rashi, when he translates the verse, usually doesn't need to bring proof to his translations. Right? He usually gives us a simple meaning of the words. He'll explain what the words mean. Right? Why does Rashi have to tell us? Unclus also translates it this way. The second thing is Rashi will usually, Rashi tells us the correct way of learning things. Rashi doesn't tell us the wrong way to translate a pasuk. That's not something Rashi does. We almost never find Rashi doing something. So why does Rashi mention that there is a second way to learn the verse, but the second way is wrong? Why is that important for me to know? And the third question is actually this second way of learning the verse is a different commentary, a different translation. It's a translation of Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, right? A student of Hillel Hazakin. He wrote a translation on the Torah, and Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel translates it the second way, that he should be happy, he should rejoice together with his wife. So
I'm not allowed to argue with him.
So Rashi's allowed. Of course, Rashi can argue with it. I mean, Rashi has a right to argue, especially since he has Targum Onkelos who argues. So Rashi could quote Targum Onkelos. But why does Rashi go out of his way to bring down Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel's pshat and to tell us that it's wrong? Seems a little bit strange.
You're saying he's allowed to argue?
Well, there are already two different translations. There's Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel and Onkelos. And Rashi could choose to follow Onkelos' translation. Now, Rashi cannot...
Onkelos is allowed to argue with them.
Yes, Onkelos is allowed to disagree, and what you're getting at, Ari, is you're looking at this as a halachic disagreement, and in halacha there are rules regarding how you could who could argue with who. Different generations cannot argue with earlier generations, but when it comes to explaining the Torah, everybody can come up with their own shot. Now, what is strange here that he's saying that's the wrong explanation. That's what's unusual, but I can come up with my own explanations of the Chumash also, as long as the foundations behind it, as long as the thoughts behind it are correct.
It's not going to help.
I can come up with my own chidushim Torah, right? It doesn't, even if it's different from the earlier commentaries. What you're talking about is in halacha. I cannot argue in halacha rule halachically against an earlier generation. So, in order to understand what Rashi is telling us, in order to understand this disagreement between Onkelos and Yonasan ben Uziel, if he should make his wife happy, if he should be happy together with his wife, and why Rashi says one of them is right and one of them is wrong. So in order to understand this, let's go back to Reb Shalom, who is unpacking his suitcase in this new rental property they got in this little Polish village, right? And he settles down, and he turns to his shamish, his assistant, and he says, I would like you to go around the town, and I'd like you to make an announcement. I'd like you to proclaim throughout the city that today is a special Eis Ratzon. It's a special opportune time, and the gates of heaven are open. Anybody who needs a blessing, who needs a special blessing, who needs assistance in any matter, whether it's a physical matter, a spiritual matter, they can come to get a blessing from me, and I'm telling you, anything you want, the gates of heaven are open. As soon as people in town find out about it, a huge line forms in front of Rabbi Shalom's house. Almost everybody in town came to get a blessing, one after another. They're waiting for hours, but there's one person who didn't show up. Who didn't show up? Tadris. Tadris knew the trick. He knows that you go to a Rebbe to get a bracha, you got to give a donation, and he didn't want to give a donation. Right? So, hours go by, everybody in town came by already, and Tadris isn't here, so the Rebbe turns to his assistant, and he says, listen, I'd like you to go to Tadris, and I want you to tell him that there's a special Eis Ratzon, a special opportune time for blessings, and if he wants a blessing, anything he wants, the gates of heaven are open. Okay, the assistant runs to Tadris, and he says, Tadris, the Rebbe says that the gates of heaven are open, you can come and ask any blessing you want. Tadris is like, nah, I'm not going to fall for this one. I know these Rebbes, they come here, they all want donations, they want me to give it tzedakah, he's going to try to convince me to give us a big donation, I'm not giving one penny. And he says, listen, the Rebbe's giving you a bracha, he didn't ask for a donation. I know, as soon as I come there, he's going to start asking for donations, I'm not going. Okay, the assistant comes back to the Rebbe, he says, Tadris doesn't want to come, he doesn't want to give a donation. So the Rebbe says, okay, go back to Tadris and tell him that I give him my word, I will not ask him for a penny. I just want to give him a bracha. Okay, so the assistant goes back, he says, Tadris, the Rebbe promised he's not going to ask you for a penny. He just wants to give you a bracha. A bracha, really? Just a bracha, no donation. What type of bracha? Anything you want. Anything I want. Okay. This sounds like a good deal. Tadris gets up and he goes over to the Rebbe. He comes to the Rebbe's house, and of course everybody's all the people around. They see Tadris going to the Rebbe. They want to find out what this is about. So they all gather around, and Tadris comes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, Tadris, I was waiting for you. You know it's a special Eis Ratzon. It's a very opportune time in heaven. You can ask for a blessing for anything you want. How can I help you, Tadris? You need a blessing maybe in your business, you would be successful, and Tadris is like, things are good, I'm doing well, all my businesses are prospering. And the Rebbe says, so maybe you could tell me what you need. Tadris sits there quietly and he starts looking around.
A blessing for not giving donations.
And he starts looking around and he sees everybody's gathered around. He says to the Rebbe, listen, I don't know. I don't think you can help me, Rebbe. The Rebbe says, what do you mean? I can give you anything you need. I can help you. I can give you a blessing for whatever you want. He says, in the matter that I need, I don't think you're going to be able to help me. And the Rebbe says, listen, I give you my word. Anything you need, I'll do my best. I'll do my best to help you. So Tadras again looks around very nervously and he says, Rebbe, I need to speak to you privately. There's one thing I need, but I can't speak about it over here. It needs to be in private. Sure. The Rebbe, Tadras going to the next room, and now that they're alone, Tadras says to the Rebbe, listen, I have a very good life. I'm very successful in everything I do. A lot of money, a lot of honor. Everyone in town is afraid of me, right?
You're afraid?
And everything's wonderful, but I have one big problem. My wife, she's terrible, terrible, terrible woman. She makes my life miserable. I can't stand her. So the Rebbe says, so sad to hear that, Tadris. But listen, I told you I can help you. I'll give you a bracha that you should have shalom bayis, that you should have peace in your home. There should be peace and harmony between you and your wife. And Tadris says, no, Rebbe, it's not going to work. My wife, I can't stand her. I don't want to be near her. So Rebbe says, I'm very sad to hear that. So in that case, I guess you want me to help you write up a divorce for her. Tadras says, no, that's too expensive. Divorce, I'm going to have to pay her up. So I give her half my money. She's going to, take half my stuff. I can't afford that, Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, so Tadras, so what do you want? You don't want a bracha to get along with her. You don't want a divorce. So what do you want? So Tadras again looks around nervously, making sure no one's listening in. And he leans over to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, I don't know if you're going to help me with this, but the Rebbe says, listen, whatever it is, I'll do my best. He says, Rebbe, a lot of people come to you and they ask you for a bracha for a long life, for arichas yamim, right? Rebbe says, of course. I always willing to give people a bracha for a long life. So he says, I need a bracha, the opposite of a long life. I want my wife to get the opposite of that bracha. The Rebbe's mouth drops open. He was stunned. Even after everything they told him about Tadras, he didn't expect this, right? Such a request. Even to think of such a thing is hard to imagine. To actually say it to a Rebbe? For a minute, Avshalom thought of giving up, right? This is a lost cause. Tadras is not, there's no way I'm going to be able to help Tadras, such a person. But then the Rebbe closes his eyes and he thinks, listen, I've never given up on anybody before. Every Jew has a spark of Hashem inside of him, a holy neshama. How could I turn away? How can I give up on another Jew? I have to find a way to help him. So the Rebbe thinks for a few minutes and he opens up his eyes and he says, listen, Tadras, I told everybody, and I told you this earlier today, that right now is a special opportune time in heaven for blessings. However, what you're asking of me is not a blessing. You're asking the opposite of a blessing. And for klala, and for that, the gates of heaven are unfortunately not open now. And that's not really something I do. I don't think he said unfortunately. But fortunately, the gates of heaven are not open for the opposite of blessings. And that's not something that I can do. Tadras gets an angry look on his face. He says, I knew it. I told you, Rebbe. I knew you're not going to be able to help me. He gets up and he's about to start walking out. And the Rebbe says, whoa, wait a second, Tadras. I didn't say I can't help you. I told you I can't give you a bracha. I can't give you a blessing. But I could still help you. How could you help me, Rebbe? I can't give you a blessing, but I could give you advice. I can give you an eitzah. Rebbes don't just give blessings. Rebbes give advice. Okay, so what type of advice could you give me? So I can give you advice on how to achieve what you want to achieve. You want, whatever you told me before. I can give you advice on how to achieve that. And Tadris is like, really, Rebbe? It's a good hitman in the area I can hire, right? We can get the job done. And the Rebbe says, no, you don't want to do that. First of all, that's dangerous, and it's also a terrible sin. You don't want that on the responsibility for such a thing. But I have a better way to achieve what you want. Really, Rebbe? Tell me. I want to hear the advice. So the Rebbe says, there's a Gemara, a Shabbos, Tadris, you're a Talmud Chacham. I hear you're very learned. I'm sure you're familiar with the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos says, Ba'avoy nedarim meisa isha shel adam. A person who makes promises and does not fulfill their promises, it's a very severe thing, a very terrible thing. And the punishment is that a person who makes a promise and does not fulfill his promise, the punishment is that his wife is taken away from him. That's the punishment. So this is a simple solution. You need to make a promise, and you have to break your promise. And it has to be a serious promise and a public promise, and you have to break your promise. And then the punishment is that you're going to lose your wife. And Tadris' face lights up. It's like, Rebbe, I learned that Gemara many times, but I never thought of it. It's brilliant. Does it really work, Rebbe? Is it some idle threat, or is it real? It's written in the Gemara. It's a real thing. And Tadris is like, wow, Rebbe, this is a great idea. Rebbe, maybe you could tell me what type of promise should I make? And the Rebbe says, well, it has to be a public promise. It has to be al das Rabbah. It has to be a serious promise. So what I advise you to do is tomorrow, go to shul, get an aliyah by the Torah. They're going to ask you after the aliyah, you want to make a donation. So I want you to get up and make a promise in front of the entire community, in front of the Sefer Torah. It has to be a serious promise. Make a promise that you will sponsor the mikveh in this town. You will build a mikveh. And then, of course, and Todd is like, I told you that, but not one penny. And he says, of course not. You're not going to give a penny. You're not going to keep your promise. And then you know what the result is going to be. Tadris is very excited. He's like, Rebbe, you're a genius. He's so happy. He thanks the Rebbe and he runs home. He's so excited. He gets up early the next morning. He comes to shul and he tells the Gavai, I need a aliyah today. And the Gavai calls him up. They call him up to the Torah. He gets his aliyah, and then the Gavai gets up and he says, Misha Beirach, right? You should bless Tadris, Bavur, Shabli Neder. And Tadris yells at him, don't say Bli Neder. Right? It's not usually you say without a promise. You don't want to make a promise. He says, I'm making a promise. Really? What's the promise? I promise in front of the entire community, in front of the Sefer Torah, that I'm going to pay the full cost of building the mikveh in this town. Wow. Everybody in shul, so excited. They all rush over to Tadris. They wish him mazel tov. They're so excited. Wow, it's amazing what the Rebbe accomplished. He was here for 2 days and he got Tadris to sponsor a mikvah. It's amazing. Everybody starts dancing around the Torah. They're lifting Tadris on their shoulders. Everybody's so excited. They finish reading the Torah. They put the Torah away. They finish davening. And after davening, the Gabbai goes over to Tadris and he says, no, so Tadris, when could we expect the first check? When could we expect the down payment? And Tadris is like, well, first check, never. Not giving it. The Gabbai's like, he leans over. Well, what did he say? I'm not giving you a penny. And he says, did we misunderstand you? Right? Was there a misunderstanding? I thought you promised earlier that you're going to give money for the mikveh. And he says, no, there was no misunderstanding. I promised I'm going to give money for the mikveh. It was a real promise, and I'm breaking my promise. Everybody in shul looks at Tadris and they're like, Tadris? Breaking your promise. It was a promise in front of the whole community, in front of the Sefer Torah. You can't break such a promise. Tadris is like, I can and I am. And they tell him, Tadris, you know the terrible punishments that the Gemara says about somebody who breaks their promise. Tadris is like, I know exactly what the punishment is, and I am breaking my promise anyway. Okay, everybody starts yelling at Tadris. They throw him out of the shul, and Tadris goes home. He's very excited. He rushes to the Rebbe's house, and he says, Rebbe, I did it. No, Rebbe, what happens now? And Rebbe's like, listen, the Gemara says what's going to happen. And he's like, no, how long is it going to take? And Rebbe says, I don't know. Maybe it could take a couple of weeks. You got to have patience, Tadris. Okay, Tadris is very excited. He rushes home. A day goes by, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks, a month passes, and one morning there's a loud banging on our Sholom's door. Tadris is there. He comes inside and he says, Rebbe, it didn't work. It didn't work? What do you mean? My wife is still alive. Okay, is she healthy? Maybe she's sick. Maybe is she something happened? Did anything happen? And he says no, she's as healthy as ever. As a matter of fact, we got into a fight this morning, and I'm telling you, the way she was yelling at me and throwing things at me, she's strong and healthy. The Gemara doesn't work. The Segula from the Gemara doesn't work. And the Rebbe's like, well, 1 second. You said you got into a fight with your wife this morning? And he says, yeah, of course. We got into a big argument. We were yelling and screaming at each other. And the Rebbe says, were the windows in your house open when you were fighting and screaming at your wife? And he says, of course, I don't care what people outside think about me. And the Rebbe says, you had a fight, is this a normal thing? And Tadris says, yeah, we fight twice a day, at least twice a day. And the Rebbe's like, says, now I understand. Of course, it all makes sense. What do you mean, Rebbe? What makes sense? So he says, the Rebbe says, the Gemara says, that a person who is publicly embarrassed, somebody embarrasses their friend in public, it's as if they killed him, right? A person who's publicly shamed is as if he was killed, as if he was murdered. So he says, of course, your wife is supposed to die, but you killed her twice today already. You kill her twice every day. How could you expect the school to work if you publicly embarrass your wife? And Tadr says, no, you're right, Rebbe. It's true. School is not going to work. Rebbe, you have any ideas, Rebbe? Maybe you could help me out? And the Rebbe says, listen, there's only, if you want the school to work, you have to stop embarrassing your wife. You have to stop yelling at her. You have to stop screaming at her. And Tadris says, well, it's going to be very tough, Rebbe. You don't know who my wife is. If you would know my wife, it's impossible not to get into a fight with her. And I said, listen, I know it's hard, but you got to make an effort, Tadris. You got to try for a few weeks. It's not going to be that long. It's going to be a few weeks, maybe a month. For 1 month, you got to treat your wife with respect. Treat her with respect? What does that mean? He says, first of all, you come home. First of all, you go coming home from work. You stop off in the flower store. You buy some flowers for your wife. You come home. You ask her how her day was. You don't get upset at her. You don't yell at her. You talk to her nicely. You treat her with respect. And Tadr says, I don't know how I'm going to manage. He said, a month? I'm trying to. I'll do my best. Tadris leaves the Rebbe's house and he doesn't know what to do. Yeah, a month now. He has to respect his wife. He goes to the flower store and he buys some flowers. He comes home and he says, hello. I don't know what his wife's name. Chana, my dear Chana, here, I got some flowers for you. Chana, how was your day? And Chana's first a little shocked because it never happened before. And first she thinks there's something fishy going on, but she plays along. She speaks to him. She answers him. And this happens the next day again. And it goes on a few days. And Chana realizes, he seems to have changed. He's actually treating me with respect. Now, the first few days were terrible for Tadris. Tadris was so difficult. Every minute was torture. Every minute he had to treat his wife with respect was horrible for him. But after a few days, it started to become a little easier. It almost felt normal. And by the end of the week, his wife was also, he's treating her with respect. She started treating him with respect. And they're both talking nicely to each other. It's not that bad. It's not that hard. Tadris. Another week goes by. And by the end of the second week, they're already starting to have nice conversations together. They're actually, enjoying each other's company. They're having normal conversations together. Respecting each other, having, pleasant, long conversations like a normal couple. By the end of the third week, Tadris is surprised. He's actually starting to like his wife. He's actually a nice person, pleasant person to be around. She's a great woman, right? And by the end of the fourth week, they're actually really close friends. After 4 weeks, one morning, just banging on Rav Shalom's door, Shalom goes to the door and Tadris is there. And Tadris says, Rebbe, terrible news. You know what happened? What happened, Tadris? He says, my wife woke up today with a terrible cough. And we called the doctor. The doctor doesn't know what it is. This is, before they had antibiotics, they weren't sure. The doctor says he's not really sure what it is. He gave her some medicine, but Rebbe, I'm really nervous. Who knows? This could be a terrible disease she has. And the Rebbe says, well, isn't that what you wanted? Haven't you been waiting for this for the last month? And Tadris says, no, Rebbe, you don't understand. My wife over the last month, she changed. She changed from one extreme to the other. She used to be a terrible, horrible woman. I couldn't stand being next to her. But now I love her. Rebbe, I can't lose her. You have to help me out, Rebbe. What can we do? And the Rebbe says, listen, if you want to save your wife's life, there's only one way to do it. You got to keep your promise. You got to keep your promise, Tadris. And Tadris says, listen, this is hard for me, but for my wife, who I now love after a month, that we get along, that we spend time with each other, I actually like her. For his wife, he has no choice. So she goes to the Gabbai, he gives the money for the mikveh. And he comes back to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, Tadris, let's sit down. I need to talk to you a little bit, Tadris. He says, Tadris, your wife didn't miraculously change over the last month. Okay? It was you who changed, Tadris. Okay? And if you learn how to respect your wife, then you'll actually enjoy her presence. She'll treat you with respect, and you'll have a much better life. But if you go back to yelling and cursing at her, then she's going to go back to how she was before also. Right? And Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe after was able to leave the town. He fulfilled his two promises. He got the mikveh built, and he was able to transform Tadris. At least in his own house, he learned to respect his wife. And slowly over time, they say that he started respecting other people and helping other people more. After building the mikveh, he kind of got the feel for helping people. And from then on, he was a different person. Chaim.
That's pretty good.
Very good.
That was a good one.
So, in marriage, a person who focuses in marriage on his own happiness, right? What can I do for myself? He's going to have a miserable time in marriage, right? We all know that, right? A person who focuses on making the other person happy,
Like Avi.
right?
Like Avi friend.
Yes, like Avi, and like we all should be doing, right? A person who focuses on helping others, of course, you're making other people happy. But more important, but it actually ends up leading to you being to your own happiness. And this is what Rashi is telling us. Rashi brings down two different commentaries: the commentary of Onkelos and the commentary of Yonasan ben Uziel. What's the difference between Onkelos and Yonasan ben Uziel? So Yonasan ben Uziel lived during a very special, a very great time for the Jewish people. Yonasan ben Uziel was one of the students of Hillel HaZaken. Hillel lived during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, when the Jewish nation was doing very well. It was a very holy time. We know that Yonasan ben Uziel was amongst the 80 students of Hillel. The Gemara tells us that he was actually the greatest of Hillel's students. The Gemara said that Hillel had 80 students. The top 30 students were worthy of having Hashem speak to them like he spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Yonasan ben Uziel was the top of these 30 students. And the Gemara tells us that when Yonasan ben Uziel wrote his commentary on Nevi'im, and the commentary on the prophets, the Gemara Megillah, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, tells us that a voice came out from heaven and said, "Who revealed the secrets of my great secrets to the Jewish people?" Right? The Nevi'im are revealed many secrets about Jewish history, about what's going to happen in the future. Who revealed these secrets to the Jewish people? And Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel got up and he said, "I did it. It was me. I did it, but I didn't do it for my own honor. I did it in order to bring peace, to stop disagreements amongst the Jewish people." He was somebody who was not, as we said, he was worthy of having the Shekhinah speak to him like spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. He was somebody who understood the deepest secrets of the Torah. The Gemara tells us that when Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel would study Torah, a fire would appear above his head, and birds that were flying overhead would be consumed by this fire.
Consumed like eaten?
Be burnt by this fire, right? Yonasan ben Uziel was lived at a time of holiness. He himself was such a holy person. He lived during a time of light for the Jewish people, during the height of the second Beis Hamikdash. Onkelos, on the other hand, lived during a time of darkness. He lived right after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Right? We know that Onkelos was a nephew of the Roman emperor. Right? He was not just lived during a dark time. He was born into a very dark place. And Onkelos's commentary also reflects this. So what's the difference between a person who's traveling in the light and a person who's traveling in the darkness? A person who's traveling in the light could look in the distance and he could see where he's going. He could see his destination. And he can focus on his destination, on where he's heading. A person who is walking in the darkness usually cannot see his destination. He could look on the ground in front of him and see a few feet in front of him. And his focus is on taking the next step. How could I put one foot in front of the other? And This is the difference between Rashi's explanation, between Unclus's explanation and Yonasan ben Uziel's explanation, right? A person who starts a new marriage, what does he focus on? What does he focus on? So Unclus tells us, what is the next step that you need to take? What is this? What is the step that you need to take? Your job right now is to make your wife happy. Now, what's the ultimate goal? What is your destination? The ultimate goal is that you should rejoice together with your wife, that you should both be happy. But how do you get there? You get there by making your wife happy. And this is why Unclus tells us, Unclus tells us the steps you need to take to get to your destination. You have to focus on making your wife happy. Yonasan ben Uziel tells us, what's the ultimate goal? What's your destination? The ultimate goal is that you and your wife should rejoice, should be happy together.
So why is it?
Now Rashi is speaking to a young child who just started learning Torah. So what does Rashi tell us? So Rashi tells us, Rashi's going to tell you, like Unclus, he's going to tell you the first step you need to take. You need to focus on making your wife happy. But Rashi knows that Tadris might read his commentary, right? And every one of us has a little piece of Tadris inside of us, right? We all have a little bit of Tadris inside of us. And if you tell a person you have to focus on making her happy, right? Some people might not want to do it. So Rashi says, I want you to know that there's another explanation here, right? There's the Targum of Yonasan ben Uziel. There's another explanation which has the ultimate goal, which is that you should both be happy together, that you should have a happy and loving and peaceful marriage together. So a person's going to say, if that's the case, then I'll focus on my own happiness. So Rashi says, no. If that's what you do, you're making a terrible mistake. If you focus on your own happiness, then you're not going to get you're not going to achieve your own happiness. The way to achieve your own happiness is by focusing on making other people happy, by focusing on making your wife happy. And this is why Rashi tells us it's the same word, but it's different vowels. Vowels in Hebrew are known as tenuos, movement. Rashi's telling us it's the same word, but there's a different approach, there's a different path you need to take to get there. And this is something that we have to realize. Of course, we have to realize in our own marriage, but we have to realize in every relationship that we have, right? Our goal, of course, is that we should be happy with our friends, with our family, with our wife, with everybody around us. But how do you reach that? The way to reach that is by focusing on making others happy. And to conclude with a final story, in Bnei Brak, there was a young couple who got engaged, Chaim and Bracha, right? They were very excited, they got engaged, and they started making the preparations for their wedding. A week before their wedding, Chaim doesn't feel very good. And he goes to the doctor. And the doctor does some tests, and the doctor comes back, and he has terrible news for Chaim. He has some very serious illness. It's not something that's fatal. It's something that you can treat, but it's going to take years of treatment to overcome this illness. Right? So what does Chaim do? There's a wedding coming up in less than a week. First thing he does is he calls his Kala, he calls Bracha, and he says, listen, I had terrible news. I was just diagnosed with this terrible illness, and obviously we need to call off the wedding. This is not what you signed up for. You don't want to get married to somebody who's going to spend the next 5-10 years undergoing difficult treatments. And Bracha says, Chas v'shalom, call off the wedding. If we're a couple, we're going to go through this together. And Chaim says, no, you don't want to put yourself in this situation where you have to get married to somebody who has this terrible illness. And she says, no, absolutely not. And their families get involved. And, Chaim's family is telling her, listen, if she wants to get married, go with it, right? And Bracha's family is telling her, are you crazy? You want to get married to somebody with this terrible condition? And they don't know what to do, so they decide to go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky to ask his opinion, to ask his advice. So they went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and of course, Chaim says, I was recently diagnosed with this terrible illness. It's going to take years of treatment, and obviously, I can't get married now. I can't put my wife through all of this. And Bracha says, what do you mean? If he would have discovered this 1 week later, if he would have gone to the doctor a week later after the marriage, is there anybody who would tell me that we should divorce a person? That's what a marriage is. Marriage, you're in it together. If you have challenges, you overcome the challenges together. So just because you happen to discover it a week before the wedding, does that mean we should call off the wedding? So they turn to Reb Chaim. What does Reb Chaim have to say? Reb Chaim thinks about it, and he says that I think that this is actually a great shidduch. You should go through with it. You should get married. You're gonna and I give you a bracha that the treatment should go quickly and easily, and you should be better very soon. Wonderful. Okay, Chaim is happy. Listen, if that's what the Chaim says you should do, he'll do it. It's the Das Torah. Bracha is also very happy. However, Bracha's family is not very happy, right? Their daughter is getting married to somebody with this terror, with this condition. So the family, so Bracha's father waits till everybody leaves, and he goes to Reb Chaim Kanievsky and he says, "Listen, I understand. Obviously, you gave a ruling. We have to follow your ruling, but according to halacha, if a rabbi issues a ruling, he has to give a source. If he's asked, he has to give his source to explain where he got his ruling from. So where in the Torah does it say that my daughter is supposed to marry somebody with this condition? Right? Where did you get where did this idea come from? Right? Where mehechan dantuni?" So Reb Chaim says that actually, let me tell you what the source for this is. The source for this is a medrash in Parshas Rabbah. In Parshas Rabbah, chapter 33. The Medrash of Parshas Rabbah speaks about Alexander the Great, Alexander Moiten, Alexander of Macedon, and it discusses his journeys. And the Gemara discusses his many interesting things that happened to Alexander along his journey. So the Medrash tells us that Alexander of Macedon once journeyed to the lands beyond the dark mountains. Now, I don't know where the dark mountains are. Some commentaries say it's somewhere in Africa. And he arrived at this at the kingdom of King Katsia. And of course, he went to visit King Katsia with his army. And King Katsia heard that the great conqueror Alexander is coming to his country. So he went out to greet Alexander. And he brought with him a golden loaf of bread. He put it on a tray. And when Alexander comes, they serve up a golden loaf of bread. Alexander says, "I don't understand. Am I supposed to eat gold?" So King Katsia says, "Well, if you wanted to eat bread, then you have plenty of bread in your own country, right? If you're going to plunder other countries and take all their gold, I assume you want to eat gold." Alexander says, no, I'm not here to plunder. I'm here because I heard that the people of this country are very wise, and I came to learn from you. I came to learn from your wisdom. Okay, says King Tatsi, you came to learn from our wisdom. Wonderful. Alexander says, can I sit with you? I want to sit with you and see how you judge your people. Okay, so they sit down in judgment, and two people walk into court. And the first person, then they tell their story, right? The first person sold, and he had an old churva, an old broken down house that hadn't been inhabited for many years. So he sold it to his friend. His friend went in and started clearing things up, and he found a treasure in the house. So he ran back, the buyer ran back to the seller, and he said, here, you left the treasure in your house. So the seller's like, well, you bought the house, you bought the broken down house, it's yours. And he says, no, I bought the house, I didn't buy a treasure. Right, it's yours. And the seller says, listen, I sold the house. I intended to sell everything in the house. And the buyer says, no, I only intended to buy the house, not the treasure. So they're arguing. They decide to go to King Katsia to resolve their dispute. King Katsia listens to their arguments, and he turns to the seller. He says, do you have a son? A son of marriageable age? Yes, I do. Do you have a daughter of marriageable age? He asked the buyer. Yes. Great. We'll make a Shiduch. And the treasure will go to the young couple to pay for their wedding and to start their new life together. Everybody's happy. The two men go off. They say Mazel Tov, right? They're very excited. They have a Shiduch now. And King Katsia looks over at Alexander the Great, and he sees his mouth is hanging wide open. Looks very confused. And he says to Alexander, what's wrong? Isn't that how they would judge this case in Greece and Macedon? And Alexander's like, first of all, this case would never happen in Macedon. Let me tell you, you can look through all the case records, all the case history in Macedon, you'll never find such a case. But if there were two people crazy enough to come with such a court case to my court, I would declare that they're both insane, lock them both up in an asylum, or maybe have them both executed so that this insanity shouldn't continue spreading in my country. And then I would confiscate the treasure and keep it for myself. So King Patsi says, really? That's how you would do? Does the sun shine in Macedon? And Alexander says, of course. Does the rain fall in Macedon? And he says, yes. Do you have sheep and goats, flocks of sheep and goats in Macedon? So he says, yes. So he says, well, let me tell you, the only reason why the sun shines and the rain falls is not in your merit and not in the merit of your people. It's because of the sheep and goats in your country. Because you don't deserve it. And the Medrash concludes that this is what the pasuk in Tehillim says: Adam uvehema teishia. Hashem saves man and animal, which means sometimes he saves people in the merit of the animals. Wow. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky finishes the story, and he says, "I have a question on this story." He turns to this, saying this to Bracha's father. I have a question on the story. Right? If the King Katsia wanted the two men to compromise and split the treasure, he could have told them to compromise and split the treasure. Who made the king a matchmaker? How does he never met this boy. He never met this girl. Who is he to decide that they're a good match? Perhaps they're completely incompatible with each other. Who is the king? Why is the king coming along and making Shiduch? Good question, says Bracha's father. No, you have an answer? And he says, of course, the Medrash is telling us what it takes to make a good Shiduch. Right? We know the Gemara brings down stories of queens and princesses who try to make Shidduchim and it didn't work out. But the Medrash is telling us if you want to make a successful Shidduch, this is what it takes. Right? When the king saw that these two people came to court and each one was not concerned about their own treasure. Each one wanted to give to the other one. They were fighting over who could give the other one the treasure. The king says, this would make a great Shidduch. Right? This would make a great Shiduch. And Reb Chaim turns to Bracha's father. He says, I've had many, many people come in front of me, many court cases. Right? Most of the court cases, everybody's thinking about themselves. This was a rare court case where Chassan is thinking about his Kala. The Kala is trying to do what's best for her future husband. So when I saw this, I was very clear that this is a great Shidduch, and I gave them a bracha. They should overcome the illness and have a good, happy life together. Chaim l'chaim. We should all realize in our own lives that, of course, we all want to be happy, but the way for us to be happy is by making those around us happy, whether it's in our own marriage, whether it's in our family, whether it's our friends, with our community. We should all focus on making others happy, and that'll lead to our own happiness as well. L'chaim l'chaim.
The story of the Baal Shem Tov coming